Hello, and welcome to episode number 256 of the LSR podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gambling industry. With me, I have not one, but two of those minds. Matthew Waters, Pat Evans joining me here as we get ready for the holidays. Fellas, thanks for making some time. And just to give everybody an idea of how this goes, going to play next week by ear. If things slow down around the holidays, we'll catch you guys in 2025. But if something comes across and we want to hop on the microphones, we will do that as well, just to let everybody know how that works. And of course, like we say each and every week, this is absolutely free. So if you want to hit that subscribe button, do all the little cool stuff and rate and review and all that, we do appreciate that. We'll talk about some stuff going on in Louisiana that is a little bit different than we've talked about a ton. We'll get a state roundup, a good old-fashioned state roundup, talk some South Carolina, Washington, Kentucky, Illinois. We'll see what's going on with the Choctaw Nation there, and it's not even in their home state of Oklahoma. And then I'm going to get a bold prediction from each of these guys. They live and breathe this on a daily basis, see what they think is going to happen here in this industry in 2025. But Pat, let's kick things off here with something we mentioned on the podcast last week. This Senate sports betting hearing did, in fact, get going.
It sure did. And you know what? I'll be honest. I was surprised that it took less than 2 hours. That was my first takeaway. I was expecting to be sitting there watching it for a few hours, and they were pretty speedy, and it was their last meeting of the year, so I think they were kind of get ready to get out of there.
Right.
It was notable. I think there were no real industry representatives there, and the American Gaming Association called that out right away afterwards, saying, hey, wait, our voice wasn't even part of this. I think that was a huge takeaway. The other thing is it was largely focused on Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, talking about prop bets and the collegiate prop bets, which he has, of course, been championing a full ban on, and has certainly swayed several states to do that. And it seemed like several senators on the committee, there were 10 of them there yesterday, were certainly interested in that idea. David Rebuck, formerly of the New Jersey Department of Gaming Enforcement, or Matt, you'll have to correct me on that, but he was the kind of like voice of reason for the industry, I think, saying, the states are doing it. The states have the same concerns you do. It's been working. We're continuing to work on this all the time. A few of the senators said that's not good enough. We're going to have to keep talking about this and find a way to get guardrails up and make this a national issue.
So, Matt, one of the things for me that as I was kind of like reading this and all that, I get the stuff with the collegiate prop bets, and, the industry would come in and they would say, okay, well, here's the deal. We ban these and then we're just going to push people back, into the black market, which there is some truth to that. Right. And so I kind of get to a fact where to a point where I think there's a happy medium here, which is, can't we just agree on lower limits for these collegiate prop bets or something, and it's like, okay, they are offered. So if somebody, and by the way, we mentioned this a ton here on the podcast, your average bettor is betting like $25, right? And like $30. So it's not like you're sitting here like restricting the whole industry if you put up a $500 limit on these bets or something, like it's not the craziest thing in the world. So I think cooler heads can prevail here. If this is something that people really, really want, and this is something that it seems like to be a very hot button issue, I think there's a way that they can maybe get together and make it to where both of them can win in this situation. Of course, sportsbooks don't want to have to put down $500 limits on props, but hey, it's better than nothing. It's better than a ban. And then you get them, hey, still part of the ecosystem. And then the other guys get what they want as well, which is, hey, we're removing the threat of these guys getting bribed.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you just said. There's the argument that, there aren't that many people that are exclusive college prop bettors. So even if they go and place their bets on the black market, they're still going to come back to us and place their bets on the legal market. And it can be debated so many different ways. But I think you're right. I think there's an easier way to do it. I think if you lower the limits, that would be, there wouldn't be as much incentive to go and try to corrupt a player or whatever it may be that they're worried about. On the other hand, some of the things that people say online of these athletes is absolutely despicable.
Yes, true.
The harassment reports that have come out, it's shocking to see what some people will say behind a computer screen. And, the athletes, of course, they don't deserve that. The officials, the coaches. I have a tough time with how hard Charlie Baker is selling this. If you remember, Charlie Baker proposed his own sports betting bill in Massachusetts. He did not want college betting in that, but he certainly signed it into law when he signed the bill and said he was quite happy to do it. So, as passionate as Charlie may be and says he is, I personally feel like this maybe detracts from some of the bigger issues in the sports betting industry. This is pretty small potatoes. Not that the harassment of any of them involved in it is small potatoes, but when it comes to the business side, Ohio did the numbers and they said that it was just easy enough to chop out and not really feel it. So I don't know if we're going to see more states take it on. I think when you have a big state like Ohio, who has really been just a shining example of regulation in sports betting, when you have some state like them do it, other states are going to notice that. So we'll have to see, but I wish we could find some kind of middle ground, like you said.
Pat, anytime anything from a federal level has ever been rumored or anything has been brought up in conversation, everyone wants to jump to doom and gloom. Oh my God, this is the end of the industry. They're going to ruin this so much. And I read your report. I read a couple other synopses of things that went down. You said it was fairly short as it was. There might be stuff in the future, and certainly we will talk about that. But it's like everyone wants to get all hyped up, thinking everything is going to come crashing down. And this was fairly benign.
It really was. I mean, in fact, you had two senators completely take it off the rails and ask Baker about trans athletes and participating in sports, and just completely detract from the actual conversation they were there to have. And that took up, a good chunk of it. But yeah, I mean, Dick Durbin, the chair of the committee, said, we're going to keep looking at this. This is only the beginning. So that's one of those things that I think people might look at and say, oh, there is doom and gloom coming. But then you have to remember the Senate is flipping in the new year. The bills that are out there that are kind of big guardrails are Democratic, and it's going to Republican. So you're going to not get a lot of action from that point of view. That said, the Republican Tom Tillis from North Carolina, he seems very intrigued to keep the discussion going and getting some sort of national safeguard something up. Who knows what that actually means. But what I did take away from yesterday is the large majority of those 10 senators, and I imagine many of the other ones in the Senate, are, pretty much acknowledging that this industry is here. It is there to stay. They understand that there is a major black market that this is helping regulate and, make sure customers are safe, but how to do it, make sure they're even safer, I guess, is what it seems like their concern really is.
And Matt, while we live and breathe this on a daily basis, I've lived in the bubble basically in my entire professional career and all this. And I think we look at this sometimes and think that the stuff that we're a part of maybe is a little bit more important than it actually is, right? And this is not to say that this is going to go completely away and that these people aren't going to care about sport. Listen, we probably do need some sort of regulation, some sort of baseline, something to make sure that consumer protections are in place and all the advertising stuff and all that. There's some sort of baseline across the board there. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's still other issues at hand, right? And I think that people get all worked up as to how this is going to, oh my God, they're going to do this and that, and the industry is going to collapse and yada, yada, yada. It's like, yeah, I mean, they're still dealing with, like healthcare, and, they're still dealing with like infrastructure and like all these things like that. So it's like, it's a deal and it's a thing, and it's certainly something they're going to talk about, but it's like, we live in it. So it seems like, oh my God, and we blow things up. It's like, in the grand scheme of things, if they were power rating the stuff that they're really going to dig in about, it's probably going to fall pretty low on the totem pole there.
I would have to assume so. Yeah. We like to think that gambling is the center of the universe and that everybody cares as much as we do. But, we've been hearing for the past couple of years, whenever you ask somebody about federal regulation, and there would always be X or Y example of why it's just not going to happen this year. There's too much happening. There's this to focus on. And, it's not like the government has gotten any calmer over the last couple of years. So I don't see this being front and center, something that they're saying we absolutely have to tackle and get it done now. Federal government moves at glacial speed anyway. And this will be closer to when the glacier melts. Than anything else.
We do have all the drones and stuff happening right now, and I know we had a congressional hearing, earlier this year about UFPs and UFOs and stuff. I mean, where does this rank compared to that? Is what I really.
I'll put it this way. I'm going to go ahead and rank that way higher, because we need to find out if the people are coming down here and stealing all of our, all of our sportsbook secrets. Obviously, that's what's going on.
That's it. If they want to bet if they want to bet, then we have something to talk about.
Exactly.
But, if not,
exactly.
then...
That's what it is. To kind of put a bow on this, though, guys, I mean, I think, though, moving forward, I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast probably are already like this anyway, and maybe it gets a little bit more blown out of proportion for the people who aren't really kind of in the know of how all this stuff goes. But y'all just said, like, this isn't going to go away. There'll be other hearings. There'll be other meetings. There'll be other people who come out and make outlandish statements and all of this. But I think the big thing to take away here, now that we've kind of gotten through one of these and seen how things went, is maybe like wait to panic, or maybe wait to like, scream and write like sensationalized headlines until there's an actual reason to do so.
Yeah. I would 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
But that's our nature in the U.S. right now, is to panic. So
it is for sure. So anyone that's listening to this podcast knows I am from the great state. I don't know if it's great anymore. I hadn't lived there. I've actually lived more than half my life elsewhere than in Louisiana, but whatever. I still say I'm from Louisiana. It is what it is. All my friends still live there though, so we can at least go there with that. They've enjoyed having legalized sports betting. They've been my own little personal focus group as to where I kind of like go to them and figure out what the actual casual bettor cares about and what they want and how that they go about things. And shocker, everything that we know about it is exactly true. They just want to turn a little money into a lot, and they don't really care about where they bet and price. They're not price sensitive and all those things. Like every single thing that we know about a casual bettor is true because I live it every single day with a giant group of my friends there in Louisiana. But this is a different little take here on Louisiana, where maybe they're kicking the tires on some other forms of gambling.
Yeah. I mean, earlier this year, lawmakers said, passed a bill that said we need to look at what an online casino in Louisiana could look like. And so they started that process recently. We had a hearing last week where tons of industry proponents sat down, kind of laid out what this means, how it can protect consumers, the same things we're talking about with regulating sports betting. It's the same thing with online casino. They heard all about that. They recognized that there was something like $4.6 billion illegally wagered online. So they said, let's figure out how to capture some of that. The land-based casinos, largely for it. Caesars, BetMGM, or MGM, what have you. Cordish companies, similar to how they did in Maryland earlier this year, came out against it. They said, we'll take part in it, but we don't like it. It's bad for brick and mortar casinos. Some of the senators kind of resonated with some of them, saying, oh, we like our land-based casino business. Let's not do anything to harm that. Chris Hebert, the director of the Louisiana Gaming Commission, said, hey, this is a matter of regulation and unregulation. This is something we need to look at, but we have to keep in mind things can get bad if you put a slot machine in somebody's pocket. So that was a major takeaway. Really, it's, again, kind of like the U.S. Senate hearing. It's just the beginning. We're just going to start talking about it. I don't think it's going to move any needles next year. I would be surprised if any online casino legislation across the country passes next year, but it certainly puts it up there. And if something does happen, Louisiana could be certainly up there because of the robust casino industry already there.
And Mr. Matt Waters, we know that this is the ultimate goal for all of these gaming companies. Sports betting, slim margin business as it is anyway, and as much innovation and all of that as you can have. There's still only so much money you can make. There's only so many games. There's only so many things you can bet on. Like it's a finite amount of stuff that happens out there that people care about. And with online gaming, online casino in specific, this is kind of the golden goose here. This is the golden egg. This is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the golden goose for these companies is getting everybody to bet parlays and betting same-game parlays and how that is helping grow those margins. And you know what? They are not as slim as they used to be, Matt, but they are still slim, and they are slim when you compare it to slots or table game margins. And yes, this is all about getting to online casino. You wonder why the tribes in California are so protective about sports betting. It's because it's the entryway to online casino. So I don't know if it'll pass in Louisiana. It's funny, we say we live and breathe this every day. Pat and I could tell you exactly what is going to be said at these hearings before they even happen, right? You're going to have the religious folks come out against it. You're going to have some companies that love it. You're going to have some companies that hate it. And it's the same cycle everywhere. Since this is the beginning of the cycle for Louisiana, I wouldn't expect anything to happen this year. But it's, these companies, I think, are just happy to be having these conversations, getting it on the books, getting it in people's minds. And I really think they're looking 1 to 2 to 3 years down the line at this point. But anywhere where they can get that first conversation going, that's a win.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And guys, look, I mean, I think too, and maybe I'm just being a little too optimistic as to how we are as a society or something, but it does seem like the more that people our age and a little younger than us kind of move into power and move into the more forward thinking people, if you will, that maybe this opens more doors for all of this down the line. So I'm kind of with you, Matt. It's like, this is probably just laying the groundwork for 3, 4, 5, whatever it might be years down the line, because look, olds are going to old and they don't want to like change anything, and they don't want to, everything is terrible and technology sucks and all that. But, as those guys start to retire or get voted out or move on or die or whatever it is, then, I think we start to get a spot where these talks aren't necessarily just like, oh, let's get it out there, but these talks actually have some substance and meaning to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's, it's a tricky subject when it comes down to it completely, but, it's something that we're going to be talking about for years because it's not going to happen fast, right? So we're going to see this conversation just go through state to state for sure.
All right, we do a state roundup here whenever we have enough state information to get at. And guess what we do this time? We're going to hit South Carolina. We're going to hit Washington. We're going to hit Kentucky. We're going to hit Illinois. Take it away, Pat Evans.
Yeah, I mean, so South Carolina, it's going to be the, I don't know, third or fourth attempt that they try to do it. There is has been zero appetite for it. I don't know if there will be this year. I mean, I've talked to some people who say, it's not going to happen until Georgia passes. North Carolina apparently wasn't enough to move the needle, their northerly neighbor. It's a pretty simple bill. It's like 12.5% tax, very industry friendly. I think we know who kind of probably led the writing of it. 8 licenses, which seems plenty for a state like South Carolina. It's not a huge state. No professional teams. SEC football is probably huge there, of course, but who knows what that actually does. And I don't know where it goes, what happens. I don't think it's going to be this year, but we'll see. In Washington, a case that's been kind of lingering, I think, from 2022, Matt. Maverick Gaming, which owns a bunch of card rooms, sued to stop the tribal compacts that have in-person sports betting at tribal casinos in the state. It was denied or dismissed earlier in 2023 and dismissed again in the circuit court just earlier this month. So that's not going anywhere. So Washington still has in-person sports betting there. Kentucky, I think that's an interesting one. Prime Sports is going to come into the Bluegrass State. Kind of interesting model they have for being, for sharp bettors, at least from what I understand. I've never used it because it's not here in Michigan. Kind of an interesting thing, again, because it's a very small state, but it's got 2 types of sports books in that model, with Circa also there. So I wonder what these sports books see in Kentucky that maybe I'm not seeing, or what, that it's very special for that market. I don't know. And then another new operator in Illinois with Bet365. Illinois, a giant market. I'm not surprised that Bet365 is kind of making their way. I think it was the 11th or 12th state, or 13th, somewhere in there. I'm still waiting for Bet365 to make a really big splash. I think we talked about that last week, but they'll be in Illinois soon. And yeah, that's my state wrap up for right now.
Matt, we did talk a little bit about 365 last week. Just want to kind of get your thoughts on them. Now they move into Illinois. We kind of saw their approach, which was they sat back at first and did nothing. Then it was kind of like ease in, put a toe in type deal. Then they make the announcement, okay, we're going to market a little bit more. We're going to spend a little bit more. We're going to try to make a little bit of a dent here in the United States. Like, I think that this was all part of their plan from the beginning. I have no inside knowledge whatsoever, but it just seems to me like they're sitting back, seeing how the market develops, seeing what the American bettor actually wants and likes, and what they can end up putting out there in front of them to make some money. And, they've got endless funds. So when they decide to come in full force, they certainly can. I'm interested to get your thought on 365 and kind of where you think they end up in the grand scheme of things with all this.
Matt, they have, a tremendous ceiling still available to them. They've really slow rolled this whole thing, and they surprised most of the industry. Bet365 is not a small company. They do billions of dollars of business every year, and they could have been in the U.S. spending those dollars with the DraftKings and the FanDuels, and they really could have been in it from the beginning, making a big push, and they chose not to. And it was always a question of when are they going to make that push? And, it kind of started last football season, and we're finally starting to see now that they're moving in and they're really making themselves known. They used to be for more like niche bettors, like with their baseball lines. If your team gets up X amount of runs, we'll pay out. And now they're really just turning into a household name. And Illinois is a great state to get into. Like Pat said, it's just a monster of a market. And I always kind of wondered why they weren't getting in. And of course, the licenses there are tied to casinos unless you wanted to pay $20 million for one of the digital only licenses. You could probably go and do the math and say that it would make sense to pay that if you're someone as big as 365 that can go out and promote and do everything that they can do. But it's really been a slow roll for them. And it's really impressive because, if you move too slowly, people will just forget about you. But they haven't. They've continued to build this brand year after year after year. And like I said, they just have the money to stay in it. Even if people weren't betting with them, they could still afford to just fight for the space, So 365 is someone that is going to be around for a long time. And when you start to talk about companies that could really eat into the DraftKings and the FanDuel and, their majority hold on the market, 365 is top of the list for me.
I look at them and I don't live in here in Nevada. I don't have access to DraftKings or FanDuel or 365 and whatever, but I have all the apps. I open them fairly regularly to kind of see what's going on within all of them. And so it's been kind of cool to see the Bet365 app, and really not even the app itself, but just the way that they laid it out kind of morph in front of me, right? So they first launched Bet365, and it was like soccer in your face, right? It was like soccer first, and like you'd go to the home screen, and it'd be like soccer, and I'm going, guys, what are we doing here? And it's like, it was almost like we're saying, it's like they were sitting back and going, oh, guys, we're in America. Football, whatever, like football is first. And then like, if it's not football season, basketball or whatever, like we can't be like leading with soccer out there. And so now the app has changed and they do that and they do it. So I've actually kind of seen how they've, if for lack of a better term, Americanized, right? Like their app here and kind of lay it out that way. And so it is, I think they've just been in a learning process, and it's interesting. I think when they decide to really, really give it a go, what they are able to do, because certainly they have their own experiences overseas and then what they've learned from being over here, and can they combine that knowledge and actually be a player, Pat? And that's kind of, I think, what we're all sitting back and really wondering here.
Yeah, and that's, to both of your points, they sat back, they were learning. I think when we look back at the graveyard of sports books already in the U.S. Landscape, which is giant for how short of a time frame we're looking at, there's a lot of European operators that have came and tried right away and failed like very quickly. And obviously Bet365 might be in a different stratosphere than some of the other ones, but like they had the money to wait. They had the kind of thought to say, okay, this is a new market, a completely different sports market than anything else in the world. Let's look and see what happens. And to your point, they certainly have changed from what I've seen too. And, maybe it'll work out for them, maybe it doesn't. But hey, they're at least doing it a different way than some of the other European
exactly. And Matt, I think that's what we can say the same thing about Prime Sports. Like, look, I always say the more options, the better for the consumer, and you will either differentiate yourself and they'll take to you or they won't or whatever. And like, it's a different model. They're trying out something different. They're going to try to appeal to people through using that different model. And, at the end of the day, it'll either work or it won't. And the market will dictate that. But I'm all for people coming in, trying to be different, trying to push the envelope a little bit and seeing if it works out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody that's coming out at this point with a sports book, they have to give you something different. They have to give you something new. There has to be something. And Prime deciding to go with the circle model, looking at their numbers early on, it was low, right? I think people had to get used to them. I think they had to understand them. And you're seeing that handle growth now in Ohio. And it's interesting though, when you take the sharp money, you're going to have good and bad months.
Yes.
And you look down the line and, they have a couple of 6-digit months in the positive. They have more 6-digit months in the negative.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just a risk that you're running with that model. You talk about slim margins with sports betting. When you get to that Prime and Circa model, it's that much slimmer. And it's easy to forget. Circa started as a sports book that was an amenity at a casino in Vegas. And those books, it's okay if you take a loss every once in a while because you're just there to, let the whales put their money down on something else. It's there to find a seat in the middle of the casino, grab a drink, whatever. Now, when you're trying to run it as a standalone business, it's difficult. It takes guts to try to do it. But I think they've done a solid job so far. I like their product. It's just going to depend on how many people really care to be betting sharply. Or, as you said, the casual bettor, they just can't care about prices. They don't.
Yeah. They do not at all. I've learned that the hard way. I've talked to them blue in the face to my friends. It doesn't matter at all. Pat, so, we talk a lot about Texas here, and mainly whenever we're talking about Texas, we're talking about Jerry Jones and Tillman Fertitta and Mark Cuban and, now what's going on with Sands and all of that within the state. We haven't really mentioned the Choctaw Nation yet, though.
No, not at all. And I think it might be time to start. We're going to be talking about Texas a lot in the next few months, the next year, the next 2 years, 3 years, if it takes till 2027 to legalize. But the Choctaw, they have a casino. It's the third largest tribal group in the U.S., so it's not small by any means. They have a casino that's just 90 miles north of Dallas, and I think that makes a lot of sense when you see them putting a lot of sponsorship partnership dollars in Dallas, most recently with the ATP Tours Dallas Open, but also the Rangers, the Stars, the Mavericks. They're really trying to plant a flag, and this comes also on the heels of a partnership with Canby to in their words, become a national powerhouse in sports betting. When that actually launches, who knows? Maybe it does launch with Texas because that's going to be a giant market. And if they can capture, even a couple, maybe top 5, that's huge if they plant their flag there. So certainly something to kind of keep an eye on that, of course, DraftKings and FanDuel will get their bag in Texas, but it'll be a fun one, as we always talk about, to see who's going to be 3, 4, 5, and it'd be fun to see the Choctaw do something.
Yeah, Matt, you guys have projected that Texas would be the biggest sports betting market there is in the country. It would surpass New York. It would surpass everybody else. And you take a look, and even if the Choctaws were like Pat said, if they were 5th. That's a still significant hunk of what would be just such an incredibly massive market.
It absolutely is. Yeah. I don't know if they would stop at 5th. I don't know if they could be higher. You have to think about the Choctaw. Not many people think about them on the national scale when you're talking about tribal gaming tribes. You think about Mohegans. You think about the Mashantuck and Pequot at Foxwoods. You think about the Seminole in Florida. The Choctaw should be part of that conversation as well. And I thought it was really, really bold when they came out in April, signing with Canby, that exclusive deal to be a nationwide powerhouse. And they're working on things right now. They have Class 2 online gaming at their casinos in Oklahoma. They're already playing with online. They're already working out bugs. And the Choctaw, it may not be a huge name around the country. I can guarantee you it's a very, very huge name in Texas. And the Choctaw have a database of those Texas people coming up to play. And when you think about why DraftKings and FanDuel got off to such a hot start, it was the DFS databases. Yeah. And so if you have somebody like the Choctaw who, and it's not like it is a relatively close drive, but it's still
Yeah.
90 minutes
Yeah.
outside, so you have dedicated gamblers who are traveling to you. You have their information. I see them as a dark horse candidate to really, really shake up the market in Texas.
So as we said, if we get enough news, we'll come to you guys next week. But if not, I wanted to make sure and put these guys on the spot here in what could be our last pod of 2024. And I wanted to get their big, bold prediction for 2025. I gave them a whole hour to think of it. So they didn't even have a day to think of it. So they had a whole hour to think of it. So we'll see how this goes down. I wish I'd have thought of this to tell them yesterday, but it's okay. It's okay. Let's kick things off here, Pat. What is your big, bold prediction here for 2025?
Well, from the legislative perch that I sit on all the time, this year was very dull. Not a whole lot happened. This year, I think, next year, in 2025, I think at least 2 states get something done legislatively. Maybe Texas throws off a miracle, and gets it done. But Georgia, Minnesota, they've been so close the last couple of years that maybe they finally get it together and do something. Maybe Mississippi goes online. Maybe South Carolina just surprises everybody and says, well, let's just do it. So I think something will happen in 2 states. That's going to be my big, bold prediction.
I like it. Matt Waters, what say you?
I know when we were speaking about Louisiana earlier that I said that this online casino conversation is a couple years down the line, and I do believe that. But ever since the beginning of this year and ramping up through the year, and it really hit a peak at G2E, the conversation around sweepstakes casinos and the chunk of market that they're able to take, I think that is going to maybe push. I think it's going to push at least 1 state to legalize this year. I think that is going to come up. I think somebody is going to make the right argument that they can make, saying, look, these guys do not have to follow all the same things that a regulated sportsbook or online casino has to. And I think they'll win over at least one legislature with that point. I mean, these guys just want money for their state at the end of the day. And when you tell them, it's kind of like sports betting and all the other options that you had.
Right.
It was there, there are people going and playing games now on sweepstakes casinos that maybe they would rather play with their favorite branded casino if it became regulated. At the same time, I don't think sweepstakes is going anywhere either. I think everything I know about their legal argument and operation, it all reads solid to me. I'm not a lawyer, but I think they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's.
Hashtag asterisks, all the disclaimer at the bottom, all the stuff like that. Like, no legal advice taken from this podcast. I'm not a lawyer.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. I'll talk to the Micro Machine Man real quick and do our little disclaimer there at the end.
Exactly. Yeah. But no, a sweepstakes, it is shaking up the industry. I don't see it going anywhere. There are analyst reports coming out saying that it's only going to grow. So I think, we've seen the gaming companies win in arguments in different states, whether it's a good faith argument or not. And I think that they probably will win in at least 1 state with that argument this year.
I'll close things out here with saying that I think we're going to find out, and this has nothing to do with us having the discussion we just had about Prime Sports and Bet365 and all this like that, but I do think we're going to find out, I think in 2025, a lot about who in the hell is the sports bettor and what do they care about and what do they want, because you have your Prime Sports and you have your 365s and your Circas and Sport Trade that's out there. And now Fanatics coming in, offering something that no one else can kind of offer with all of that. And they have a whole year now. They've got a lot of data behind all of this. They can see what DraftKings and FanDuel and MGM and Caesars all did and how they position themselves in the markets with this. And can a dent be made basically by any of these companies over the course of 2025? Or at the end of the day, do people only care about brand name? Do they only care about DraftKings and FanDuel and MGM and Caesars because that's what they know and that's what they've heard and those are the brands that are recognizable to them, or that's the casino that's down the street? I think we'll find out something about these sports bettors here in 2025, because there's a case to be made that all of those companies that I just mentioned have a unique and interesting angle that if you care about like we said, being price sensitive, or an incredibly massive amount of markets like 365 have, or the option to get a free jersey when you sign up and deposit at a Fanatics or whatever. Like we're going to find out if all this even matters to anybody, or if it's just like, I've heard of DraftKings. Oh, whatever. I've heard of FanDuel. It is what it is. There's an MGM casino down the road for me. That's all I care about. So I think that 2025 at the end, when we're doing this podcast here in December of 2025, we're going to go, oh, the people actually cared about that stuff. Or we go, they didn't care about that stuff. I think there's like some of that to be figured out here over the next 12 months as well. Guys, everything that we do, talk about this, is over on legalsportsreport.com. So please go in, take in all of these guys' articles that they put out on this site, because they are watching and listening and summarizing and all the things, so you don't have to. Again, maybe we talk to you guys next week. Maybe we don't. If we don't, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays and New Year's and all the things like that. And if we do, then we'll just tell you that again next week as well. For Matt, for Pat, I'm Matt as well. Talk to you guys maybe next week.